All right, so this is the gauge cluster out of the wagon, and you can't read it because the lens has yellowed to the point that it's pretty tough to see through. You can kind of see through it. Anyway, I just plugged it in the Green Cricket, and I did have to kind of touch a couple of the lights to make them turn on, but all the gauges work, except I haven't hooked up the oil pressure gauge yet, but I'm sure it'll work fine. So I have an issue with the cluster in the car. So between the printed circuit being in terrible shape, this one's actually in excellent shape, and the state of Washington, living out there with being a rainforest. I mean, look at these nuts. Look at these things. They're clean. These nuts are corrosion free. These ones have a little bit of corrosion. Even so, they're not stuck, I'm sure. Mine, so I was trying to transfer. I have another gauge cluster that has a really nice printed circuit, but it's out of a non-decor group car, so it does not have the voltmeter, it does not have the oil pressure gauge. So I went through the whole thing. I transferred the speedometer over, I transferred the oil pressure gauge over, and I tried to get the voltmeter out of my original cluster, or at least the one that's in the car. And those nuts were rusted solid. Soaked them, tried to kind of work them back and forth, took vice grips and squeezed them really hard to see if I could break the rust. I tried to hold the inside of the shaft, but the whole thing was turning, so I quit while I was ahead. Unfortunately, I didn't quit soon enough, and so now the gauge doesn't work. The other problem was, as I was plugging the gauge in to test everything, it actually cracked in two places there. These things are super brittle. I mean, this one's cracked. Now, that car doesn't use these two top screws, so it won't be a problem. I'm going to go ahead and glue that anyway, but temperature gauge did read very high. So, and I know that the sending unit isn't 100% compatible. I know that it did read a little high before, but I may have to get in there and do something. But I digress. So I'm going to go ahead and take this thing apart and get a look at the inside of it. I did lube up the speedometer out of my old one because if you didn't already know, these things don't use your typical worm gear odometer. They have a little arm that's on a cam, and it comes out and it grabs a tooth and it moves the 10th mileage thing by like half a tenth. So this little arm comes out, moves it. And so every time it pulls on that thing, the speedometer will actually drop about 2 miles an hour. And I was at the point where it was dropping about 5 miles an hour. And so while I had it all apart, I lubed it with lube all. It's got Molly in it. And on the way home, that thing was barely moving. So, great. At least that came out of it nice. And I cleaned everything else up inside. You know, my lens is getting yellow. I changed it out, God, at least 30 years ago. So I'm going to take this one apart and get a good look at it. First look, it's dirty. Not going to lie, but it's actually really nice. Pretty much, anyway. These needles aren't faded too bad. I'm not going to use the speedometer. Here's something interesting. This little number right there, 1,000. So that is 1,000 revolutions to make 1 mile. The one that's in the other car, I think, is 1020. It won't affect it too much, but it's just interesting that the wagon has a slightly different speedometer than the sedan, even though the gears are the same. I guess the tires maybe were different, or maybe it's making up for, you know, having a load on it. So all the stuff needs to be cleaned anyway, but I think it'll be okay. All right, so here it is. And everything was fairly free. It was very stiff, and so a little antique 3M oil there, and it turns freely now. And the odometer was was kind of stuck, but I got it freed up. I set it on 0, and then we're almost on 1, so yeah, everything's working. But here's how it works. And again, this is for the people who don't know. Where your normal cars have a worm gear, kind of like that one. You can't hardly see. Kind of like that one. So that worm gear turns this gear. This gear has a little eccentric. And that eccentric, kind of hard to do here with one hand. Pardon my movements. Okay, so that eccentric, what it does is it turns in a circle and it takes this arm and it pulls it down, kind of brings it up, out, back in, pulls down. And so every time it pulls down, it moves this thing either a quarter or a third of the way on the mileage. And so it'll just kind of move a little, and then 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 move a little, and every time it moves, it makes the speedometer drop a couple miles an hour. So there you go. That's how it works. All right. So I've got the dashboard all taken apart because I needed to work on the gauges. So here's the speakers I did a couple years ago. And well, the sound quality's crap, let's be honest. They're just really cheap 4-inch speakers. I needed something very shallow so it would clear the controls here and the vent hoses. Plus, you know, this Bluetooth controller isn't very, I mean, you can't adjust the tone or anything. It's just an amplifier is all it is. So all that together, it works, but I decided, you know, I'm going to hook the 6x9s back up in the back to, you know, get a little more tone. So those are 4-inch. Those ones there were 3-inch, and I had those hooked up first, and they sounded like absolute garbage. They sounded like straight tweeters. So I went back here, and I hooked up the 6x9s, and one of them, you could just barely hear one of the little tweeters working. So I pulled them out, and this is what I found. They're both like this. You can see the cone. The interesting thing is the foam is still intact. But, yeah. And these damn things were like $200 when I bought them. But they're 25 years old. Plus. That's where they belong. I've got some generic 6x9s at the house. I don't need anything fancy. I definitely don't need anything with tweeters on it because what I've got work. So I've got these, and I don't need them colored like this anymore. I definitely don't want any bling-tastic speaker covers. Not like I've got the money to waste on buying speakers anyway, especially when I've got some buried in the garage. And somewhere back here I saw a can of black paint. See, there's the old air conditioner that I took out, and you can see how small these squirrel cages are. The new one, they're about twice that size. Well, I don't see the black paint. But these just need to be repainted black. I don't think I need to put any detail into them, just paint them. And this was the AC unit out of a Dodge truck. They're both aftermarket, dealer installed units, but this one was actually built for the truck. So it's a little better unit. Oh well. I need to clean out the back seat of this because that dashboard's underneath all that stuff and it's probably all busted. Well, anyway, I'm gonna go inside and clean these up. Alrighty, well, the Rambler's still getting the head gasket ball joints done. So I've taken to working on the Cricket, the OG Cricket. That would be olive green, original gangsta, my number one Cricket. I've been driving it a lot more lately because the weather's been decent. The AC in this car I installed 30 years ago, and it worked, but it's never really worked that well. So the first system I put in there was an aftermarket, basically an underdash unit that could hang under the dashboard, or it would have a cap over the end of it that the hoses would come off of and be mounted up in the dashboard, which is what it was. Came out of a 74 Capri, and it didn't blow very cold and it didn't blow very hard. And so here about 15 years ago, I pulled the unit out of an 82 Courier. It's a Frigette unit, and it had the cap, and it had kind of a panel that went under the dashboard with 4 individual vents. And so I just didn't use that part, and I hooked it to my existing vents. And it got cold. It got real cold, but it didn't blow at all. Like you put your hand over it and you can kind of feel a drool of wind. It was about like your little fan that cools your hard drive in your computer. And so that's pretty frustrating. Like, I'm checking everything out in it and trying to figure out, well, what's wrong with this? Because there's no way that this could qualify ever as a working AC system. Okay, I never could find anything wrong with it. The blower fan motor worked fine. It spun fast, sounded fine. It wasn't clogged up with dirt or anything like that. So I couldn't find anything specifically wrong with it. Now, some years ago, I had bought a brand new unit, out of China, but basically the same type of thing. So I bought this thing roughly 5-6 years ago. Never got around to installing it in anything. I think it cost me about $80. And so one of the first things you might notice is these squirrel cages are about twice the size of my other ones. I will show that to you soon. This is the wire, which is kind of weird because this is awfully small. This is 18 gauge, where my other one was like 12 gauge. I'm not really enthused about the font on the switches here. They look very much Chinese. I do like having the little light, the indicator light, to show that it's powered on. But stuff like that can be changed. One interesting thing about this, one of the reasons I bought it. So you have your AC lines. You also have heat. And so the other day at work when I was comparing these things, I powered them up and had them blowing right on me, right? And so this unit was making my shirt flutter. The other unit, hardly anything. But it still didn't feel as powerful as I thought it should feel. Like that unit that came out of the Dodge truck, this is the blower fan for it. And this is the only blower fan for it, one squirrel cage. This SOB was trying to blow the glasses off of my face. So that didn't feel that powerful. However, when I put the whole unit together and stood in front of the vent, it didn't quite feel as powerful as that even. So I opened it up, took it all apart, and I wanted to see if you could pull the heater core out of it. Like if the heater core was in front of the evaporator core, was it blocking airflow? Well, what I found out, you can't see, there's no way for me to show it to you, but the heater core and the evaporator core are one and the same. The tubing for the evaporator is all aluminum, but the tubing for the heater core is copper. And it only runs up about a third of one row. So I don't think the heater's gonna work real well, but I don't drive this car in bad weather. What I do need though is a defroster. We'll get to that. So this is going to go into this car. It's going to be hooked up. These are O-ring. What I have in the car currently are flare. What I'd like to do is make a short hose come over here to flare and just tie into what I've got rather than have to replace everything I've got. Fortunately, that's not really going to work. I can get the fittings for this, and I can get female flare, but I can't get a male flare fitting in AC line. But I can get a male flare fitting in hydraulic line, but I can't get the female fitting in O-ring, in this kind of O-ring, in hydraulic. Because otherwise I just make a 1 foot hydraulic hose. So yeah, we're gonna have to get that. I've got a bunch of fittings I ordered at work. So here, Friday, I will find the right ones for it and go from there. I don't want to splice a bunch of stuff, you know. So this is going in there. I do need to test fit it. I need to get the brackets lined up. It's going to come back out because I have to deal with the hose stuff before I put it in. And then this, I'm going to cut the wires somewhere around here because I want these to stay in the dashboard. So when you pull the dashboard out of the car, you can pull it out and just unplug one connector rather than having to unplug all this or take the switches out of the dash. This trim piece right there laying on top of the dashboard is very, 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 very delicate. You can see it's already been all hogged out from the old AC controls. I don't want to damage that any further. So, I need to come up with a ground wire. And I kind of want to replace this with a heavier wire, even though it doesn't seem to pull a lot of current. The other one, the original one, I'm holding the wires onto the battery and they're getting hot. This one, not so much. And no, they weren't smoking or burning me. They were just getting noticeably hot. But you can see these things are pretty decent size, especially compared to the old ones. Okay, so there's that. The other thing I need to do right now is I've gone ahead last night and I found my speakers. I took them out of the little cabinets they were in and I stuck them in here, and I couldn't use those covers that I had. They would not line up with the holes. These ones my boss gave me. He bought some 6x9s for his truck and he didn't use these covers. He gave them to me and they fit perfectly fine, other than they don't sit flush because the speaker has kind of a riser on it. I'm gonna redo this anyway, this package shelf. I'm gonna make one out of either fiberboard or that corrugated plastic, and I'm gonna put padding in there, and so that'll take up that thing. And these will actually be screwed down anyway. They're just kind of sitting in there anyway. I need to come up with the spade terminals to connect them, and that project will be pretty well done. So back in the days when I used to be somewhat of an audiophile, and I had my pass box and my 1,000-watt amp, this would come off of the smaller amp for the signal. These green lights would turn on when I turn the amp on. Yeah. And I had these big fat speaker wires. It was so dumb. Anyway. So I can finish that project up pretty quick. I need to clean up some of this wiring, and when I left work the other day, one of the wires burned up. I didn't have anything grounded though. It was actually the light bulb wire for this, which is weird because it's not grounded anywhere. It has its own ground, so I don't know why it burned up. But I need to fix that. And I need to, revisiting the gauges. It's been a couple weeks. Temperature gauge still reads high. gas gauge actually reads slightly low, and you'd think, oh, well, it's your voltage regulator. Nope, I changed it. It didn't make any difference. So I have no idea why. Something weird. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to get started cleaning that up. Oh, let me show you what my plan is for the defroster. Okay, I need to preface this by saying I love this car. Engineering-wise, this car, there's not a lot there that makes you scratch your head. No pun. Compared to other British cars that I've owned, this thing is far better engineered than like a Marina. To me, a Morris Marina, Austin Marina is the biggest piece of crap I've ever owned. But some of the things that they did over there that were very common on many cars, it's just kind of an English car thing, were just kind of like, you guys didn't really think that through very well. So let me show you this. This is a Plymouth Cricket Hillman Avenger, Dodge Polara 1500, 1800, Volkswagen 1500, Sunbeam heater box. The fan, it's mounted in the car about like so, about like that. The fan clips into the top here, just snaps into these slots. This is actually the original unit out of this car. I don't think it leaks, but it's beat up. It's real beat up. And you can see there's some foam in here from way back. I sealed it from the environment. Anyway, so the fan clips in here and the fan goes up into the cowl of the car. We'll get to that in a second too. So I'm just gonna have to pop the hood and show you. The defroster comes out here, splits and goes. And then you've got your door here that directs where the air goes out of. Every single one of these cars that I've parted out, this little deal here is broken off. And that's where the cable goes, and the little arm stick comes out and it moves it. This is more like fiberglass than plastic, and it seems to break very easily. This is the position right here for defroster. And I've got in this car, in the unit that's in this car, because that's broken off, I've got a screw in there holding it into the defrost position. Because honestly, this heater is so bad, it won't warm the car and it won't hardly even warm your feet. But it will defrost the windshield some. There was one trip we took in this thing, and it was probably down in the 20s, and we had freezing fog on the windshield, and I just had to park because the defroster would not keep the windshield from freezing. This originally is where your two dash vents on either side of the heater controls, that's where those came out. Right there, those connected to the heater box. Now the problem you'll notice is that is on top of the heater core. Here's the outside air, there's the fan, there's the vent. The only thing shutting the vent off from the outside air is this little door here, and just kind of closes it off. Now, it doesn't seal at all. You know, there's still a little tiny bit of draft coming out of those things. So driving down the road with your hand on the steering wheel, you got a little bit of a draft blowing right on your knuckles. Nice. And so what I had done when I put the air conditioning in is I screwed a little piece of plastic over this and siliconed it in. This little hole right here is where the wires pass through for the fan. But that was all siliconed in, sealed off. That presents us with another problem, is there's no recirculation function whatsoever. Air will still go through here. So it goes through the heater core and out the defroster. So even with no water flow to the defroster, you still have outside air, under hood air, coming out the defroster vents. So that kind of, does away or defeats the whole purpose of air conditioning. If you got warm air blowing through there and cold air coming out of the vents. So I made this a piece of magnet, just a magnet with vinyl on it, and I kind of painted the vinyl to match-ish. It was either that or painted black. That's what I was looking for, that black paint the other day. It just covers it off. That has done wonders for keeping outside heat from out of there. Not 100%, but wonders. So once upon a time, I took this unit off and pretty well destroyed it taking it off. And so this was off of a really rusted out parts car. In fact, if I remember correctly, like right here, it's pretty deep pitting because this touched it. But I made it, screwed it back in. I could weld it all back in there, but I'm not going to worry about it for now. This is off of a very early car. You can tell because it's only got this little cutout right here, where the later cars had either two openings, or they'll have like one opening over here and that cutout, or they'll have two openings or just one opening. Either way, it doesn't matter. This is to let leaves out and water out. That's the only purpose. These rivets, it's supposed to have a piece of rubber there. I'm guessing so you can pull the rubber out to let the stuff out. I don't know. You can see there's another hole over here, which I think is factory. But yeah, so I still need to seal that off because it's still pulling hot air in from there. This is where the windshield washer hose would go. But I don't know. The screws are ugly, but I'd rather leave it so I can service it. Regardless, so I need to pull this off and I need to put a piece of metal in there. Again, I did this a long time ago and I undid it when I moved to Washington, and now I need to redo it. Need to cap off that hole so that no air can get in there. And we're gonna have to get creative with the heater hoses because these are right there, and I need to figure out how to tie them into the new heater. The new heater is way over here, and I'm not cutting a bunch of holes. The closest thing I might do is come over here and open these back up. I had this really cool AC unit out of a van, and it barely fit this car, and it blew real hard, and it blew real cold, and it would have been great. And then when I was installing it, I accidentally put a screw right through one of the rows, the tubes in the evaporator. So I never even got to run it. But anyway, right now, I need to go over there and go get those connectors, get the speaker project done, and then I need to fit the heater unit and kind of figure out where everything's going to be. So my plan for this, or the one that's in the car anyway, I'm just using this for mock-up. This is going to be closed off like it is anyway. I'm going to unsolder the two wires that are going to the motor itself, but keep the resistor so I can still have, a 3-speed fan or 2-speed fan. I'm going to get a fan unit that'll just sit in here, and it'll sit right on the heater core. And it should be just enough to make the defroster work. So that'll sit in there, and I don't think I need to mess with anything else. It doesn't need to be sealed off. It doesn't need to be capped off. It'll just sit there, boom, done. I don't even need to cap this off because it'll be capped off there. So this will still be for the defroster. Now this, interestingly, is held on with little screws. Take all those screws out, take a piece of metal and bend it to fit that shape, screw it back on. I'll use the existing holes if I have to. A couple holes here. I can take this out because it won't matter anymore. So basically, or I can even cut it off here and yeah, I could do that. Just cut it off right there. Yeah, cut it off here, cut it off there. No, I don't. I have to leave this. So I can cut it off right there. I cut it off there. It doesn't matter. If I make a piece like this, I can just screw it to it, seal it up with silicone, call it done. Good. That's the whole point. Get rid of all this on the bottom. Get rid of the heat function because I'm going to have the heat function there. I don't have to deal with messing with any hoses. I don't have to split one of these because I've got 4 vents. So 4 vents, I've got 4 outlets here. I don't have to split one of them and run it to the defroster and then figure out some kind of a way to shut it off and lose that flow, you know. So that's the plan. We're gonna modify the heater box. I'll make everything up off of that, and then when I pull this all apart, I'll modify this box, put the fan in it, seal that off, put the AC unit in, boom, we're good. As far as other stuff, if anybody's curious, I made these hoses up years ago. Clamped them up, and of course it clamps, or crimped them, the clamps to the dryer. It's just a sanding unit. Just your generic sanding unit. The bracket, I've actually got 2 of them. One of them's a welded bracket, I think from ARA, which is probably one of your biggest aftermarket AC units back in the day. And then this one is a cast unit. It's still not a Dawson part. It's still an aftermarket part. That one might be for Jet. I don't know. I liked it better though because it has a tensioner for the belt rather than having to loosen the whole compressor up, turn it, hold it, tighten it. This way you bolt the compressor on and then you use that tensioner. And you can get the idler or the tensioner pulley pretty easily. So, you know, it's just a generic one. So that was fine. And this is still the one from the Capri, believe it or not. It's kind of beat up, but it still works. Does a pretty good job. This fan unit is out of a Datsun 310, a Cherry, a new Cherry, whatever they call it in other countries. So yeah, it does a fine job. I mean, this thing, the fan brings the cooling down. I know a lot of people will always say, oh, you know, go to electric fan. Electric fan's better than mechanical fan. This is not entirely true. Mechanical fans will almost always flow better than electric fans unless you buy a really expensive, super duper electric fan. And you got an older car with a carburetor like this. This fan only turns on when it gets to a certain temperature. I think I have it set at 190, maybe 200. Meanwhile, everything underneath the hood is just cooking until it gets to that point. You got a mechanical fan, it'll be running 180, 190, but it's always moving air. So it's always moving air past the carburetor. You say, oh, well, it's hot air from the radiator. Yeah, but, you know, everything in here is cooking. You got hot air from the radiator, hot air from the engine, even hotter air yet from the exhaust manifold right underneath the carburetor. So vapor lock could be a problem, even though I've never had that problem with mine. So, yeah, that's interesting. That looks like antifreeze leaking, but I don't think it is. Anyway, let me go grab those things and we'll get busy on the other projects. All right, so it's tentatively mounted. As you can see, it's not tight or anything. It sits in there about like the other one did. This one's a little bigger, which could be a good thing, I don't know. Now, one thing you can see right there, there's a pretty good gap. So that part needs to be up against that part. And that part is actually, as you can see, pulled down a little bit. And I think the AC unit's probably to blame for that. So, I mean, there's very little room for this thing. So I can push it up and get it off of the bottom of the dash. I mean, I can always even come down here and cut this corner off or straighten it out. I don't think I'll need to do that though. So I think once that is pushed up. Now the hose could be a problem because I need to make a ground wire. So that is, I think, the liquid line. So that won't be a problem. That'll just come down and go around the back here. But the other one behind it and on top of it might be a problem. Let's see. You can't even really see it. Yeah, I can't really see it. But from the look of it, or I should say from the look of it, from the feel of it, it feels like it's going to be right up against this fender well, which, if I have to, I can dimple it. It's not a big deal, and it's actually been done before. But I don't know. I'll have to take a look at it. Okay, so if you look at this picture here, you can see where it is. So it should be okay, I think. I don't think the camera's gonna pick it up this way, but it's back behind there. There'll be enough room. What I'll have to do is run a 45 out of it and then just come around underneath. You might be able to see it down here, maybe, I don't know. Frankly, I don't care. As long as I have cold AC, I'm happy. Yeah, I think we'll be okay. So this corner is basically going to support the bottom edge of this thing. That's not necessarily kosher. I mean, there is a spot where I can make a bracket to support it in the middle, but I don't think it needs it. It's not heavy, not at all. Not even like the old one, to be honest with you. But I think if it's mounted like that, and then the dashboard comes up, I think the bottom of the dash will probably do a pretty good job of supporting the unit. Yeah, I think we'll be okay. So now the next problem is that these are 2.5 or 2.25, I think, where my old ones are 2-inch. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. Plus, they're gonna have to make a hard arc to get into there. It might not be a problem though. I think we'll be okay. But I may have to come up with some kind of 90s to come off of there. And then, you know, I got to clean up all this wiring and caca. I'm not going to run my tweeters anymore because I don't need them with these little speakers. They don't really help any. Besides, I'm already running 4 speakers where only 2 speakers are supposed to go. And I did check the temperature though, and it's not getting hot at all, so I think we're okay on that. So we could take all that, this black and white wire there. That's for the tweeters, the Kenwood tweeters. I could take those out. I'm still kind of kicking around the idea of smoothing and painting the dashboard, because the texture that I tried to do way back when, it looks more like bed liner than texture, but I don't think shiny would look good either. I think if I just sand them kind of rough and then put wrinkle finish on them, they might look okay. The wrinkle finish, in my experience, unless you bake it, does not hold up. So I don't know if that's an option, especially since it's going to be in the sun all the time. It's worth a shot. I really don't feel like pulling it all apart and redoing it though if it doesn't work, or if it doesn't last. I hate doing jobs twice or more. But anyway, on to the next project.